fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back. This is going to be a fun one. A little while ago, we had fellow insider member Dave Dowdy on the call. You guys loved it. The guy had just a really amazing story. And a lot of people said, hey, it would be cool if you featured some other insider members. So I've been purposely kind of going through our feed. And if you're not an insider member yet, what the heck are you waiting on? And if you are, you know what I'm describing. But we have a private community that we built that's kind of it's kind of like a mixture of Facebook, because it still feels social and it's on your phone and tablet, wherever you want it. But it's well organized. So you can look up things by area, by region, by city, by species, etc. So it's much easier to find stuff, meet new friends, and it's got a really cool interactive map where you can see every fishing report out there. And there was this one gal named Tanya who kept popping up, and like every time I was like, man, she is like dialed into these redfish. And I kept looking, I was like, all right, what is the story? And Tanya had reached out to me about asking if she could use a couple of our videos when she was going to be speaking at a seminar coming up. And I was like, all right, I got to get her on this call and figure out the story. And the cool part for me, I love these because not only are these unscripted, I don't know much about her story. And I'm really dying to know how she has become a redfish whisperer. At least that's what it looks like from the countless reports that I keep seeing coming in. So Tanya Dowdy, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me on today.
So what is the backstory? You're in Charleston, South Carolina, South Kakalaki?
Yeah, so I am a native of Charleston, South Carolina. Actually grew up on Lake Moultrie, not fishing. Funny enough, I actually grew up just water skiing, tubing with my family, and ended up getting into fishing kind of later in life. Kind of bought my first boat, and my husband and I were making our way through one of the waterways, and I saw this fella pull up this ginormous coppery colored fish, and I had no idea what it was, and I said, hey, I gotta catch that, and that kind of started the bug for me.
And I assume you're talking about a redfish.
I quickly learned it was a redfish, and still find it kind of baffling that I had no clue that there were those kind of fish in our waterways here. But again, that was me being a freshwater girl and new to the saltwater world, even though it was right in my backyard. So pretty funny. If you don't open your eyes, you don't know what's going on.
So not many people, men or women, just go buy a boat. Like, were you doing this to go fishing? Like, had you been bass fishing? Well, what's the story there?
Well, the first little boat we got, it was kind of just to run the waterways in Charleston, and it was a small, honestly, just because affordability wise, it was a much smaller little boat. It was a little 15-foot Stinger, and added a little polling platform on it, added a trolling motor, and that was kind of my first fishing little machine. And once I started really fishing, and then kind of started dabbling in tournament fishing, I decided I needed to get a better fishing vessel. And so I started looking at some of the flats boats and what we could potentially afford, and had my eye on an action craft, and the stars aligned, and came across a really nice used action craft, and brought that into my world, and that probably opened Pandora's box as far as my fishing addiction.
So what was the time frame from you going to not even being able to identify a red drum to tournament fishing for them? I would say mid to late 2000s. I learned what, some of the saltwater fish were.
And then I want to say my first tournament was probably 2012, 2013. And I got the action craft. Actually, it was April of 2013. And that's when I really kind of started fishing some of these bigger redfish tournaments. Was April of 2013. So
that's awesome. So I'm blown away by that one. How did all of a sudden you like say, hey, I'm just going to get in our tournaments? And are you doing this like with your husband, a friend? Like how do you go from not even knowing what the redfish is, and all of a sudden you're in a pretty short amount of time? And I assume you still had, a normal job, because I know at least part of your story in the vet world. What did that look like?
Yeah, so we were working our rears off almost 7 days a week. We had a veterinary practice, and so I'd try to make time on the weekends. And I just started kind of fishing more and starting to meet some new people. And I got introduced to somebody that did do some tournament fishing, and you happen to be actually looking for a potential redfish partner for some of these tournaments. And I said, well, okay, let's give it a whirl. And so he and I started fishing some tournaments together, and it sort of took off from there. And again, the bug just got in me. And so it was like every opportunity to get on the water, I got on the water. And I guess, it's been almost 2 years ago, we actually sold our business, sold our big house, downsized, and moved into a very, very small house. And now I have the opportunity to actually fish several days a week. I work 2 days at one of our local tackle shops. It's Hadrell's Point Tackle, and that has opened up a really big door for me as far as opportunities for fishing and just learning. And then, certainly a shout out to you guys at Salt Strong. I joined, I think I'm in my third year, and just really the wealth of knowledge and just getting out on the water has helped me, really become a much better angler. And I'm very confident when I go on the water now. Rare that, I don't get a fish in the boat, or, we get quite a few fish in the boat. So that's kind of where it's at now.
I love it. So that's what I really want to dial that in, because I mean, that's really the goal, right? Of all anglers is really to have the confidence. And, Luke and I went out yesterday, and it was just one of those days. I know you're experiencing right now in South Carolina. It's just been blowing. It's been a cold, kind of crummy February so far. And it wasn't ideal. Like, had we been able to pick a day, we probably wouldn't have gone out to film, especially when it's, about 18 mile an hour winds. But we're like, you know what, let's just go out and at least just get a bunch of tight lines. And we knew we could do that. We didn't catch any, really nice slot fish or over slot fish, but we caught a bunch of fish, which is always, I think, once again, the goal of most, especially weekend warriors, right? And that back when you were working like crazy, when you finally get that one break, you just want to get tight lines. The worst is spending 7 hours out in the water and catching nothing. So like, talk through that. How did you become good? Like, how did you build up that confidence besides obviously time in the water? Maybe we'll just start with the off the water stuff. What were you doing besides looking at all the Salt Strong stuff, in terms of like pre-trip planning and just getting more knowledge in your head? What did that look like for you?
Early on, really, before, I guess, this technology was put at the forefront. I'd get every article I could find on redfish, ask friends that I knew fished, and then certainly get online and look at as many pictures as I could, and just try to take advantage of learning from, sort of any and every person that I could as far as what would help me on the water. And then certainly getting on the water has really upped my game. And instead of now being that weekend warrior, for me, it's just, if I've got great weather, then I'm going to get out there 1 to 2 days a week, and it's just working areas until I get them figured out. And I think patience has a lot to do with doing well. I'm a person that I don't mind camping out at an area to figure out when those fish are going to actually bite in that area. And I think that's where a lot of anglers, they get tired of sitting in an area if the fish aren't right there and biting at the time that they're there. And oftentimes you have to figure an area out. You've got a dock that might be a perfect incoming dock, but then the other 12 docks that are on that same run are all outgoing docks. And that's just a matter of figuring out where those fish are going to be, at what time of the tide cycle, and time of day.
And so how much time are you spending like on Google Maps when you're looking at spots, new areas to fish?
Now, I honestly, now a lot more than I used to, just because it certainly will help you decide whether or not an area is worth going to take a look at. Because, certainly for people, especially those weekend warriors that, don't have the time to camp out in an area and are hoping to catch fish, it's much better to go ahead and know, hopefully, that, okay, I've got 6 spots, on this run that are going to be worth taking a look at today versus, hey guys, let's dump the boat in and let's go run 20 miles and see if we happen to catch fish at this one spot we know there's a fisher at.
Yep. And real quick, are you live bait or artificial mostly? So
I like to use artificial baits. The big redfish tournaments are artificial only, and honestly, for me, to be able to, if you will, fool a fish with artificial bait, I think is part of the addiction. You can finesse fish, I think, much better using artificial bait, and you're not having to count on either catching it or hoping that you've got live bait at the tip of your fingertips. And I absolutely love to go out and sight fish for redfish, or even, fish docks and certainly use any of these artificial baits. I'll toot their horn, but I'm certainly a huge fan of a Z-Man. They're one of our local companies here in Charleston, and they make a fantastic artificial plastic bait. And we also have the Eye Strike guys that are here in Charleston who make the trout eye jigs and Texas eye, and that has really changed, I think, the way we are able to fish artificial baits when you've got really quality products. I've got some really great pictures to prove that they work, and man, it puts a huge smile on your face when you get that fish to the boat and you go, ha, look what I caught you on.
What's your favorite kind of profile? Are you into the Z-Man paddle tails or? I like their jerk baits. The shrimp jerk Z is probably my favorite, paired with their Texas eye, and I like to fish that 3/16 ounce Texas eye rigged on that. It's pretty hard for a feeding redfish to pass that by. If you can work that bait enough and get them to be tantalized by it, it's a fantastic bait. Yep. So I've heard you say docks multiple times. Is that one of your go-to types of structure?
So it is, but I also do a lot of flats fishing, which, we're looking for banks that have some nice oyster bars. We've got a lot of nice flats here in Charleston. I also fish in the Beaufort area, and we've got a lot of great flats there as well. And typically we're looking for areas that, have a lot of oyster bars. We're looking for some feeder creeks along. But those are great areas that we're working, especially if we're tournament fishing. We're working those banks and looking for schools of reds and, hopefully get on them and get the pitch to them and actually see them. And I love chasing fish that we can see. To me, that's exhilarating.
Well, and I think a lot of people think of, Georgia, like Savannah and areas like Charleston is more murky water, meaning like you don't think of that like, the Florida Keys where it's, gin clear. What do you do in those types of areas? Because there are areas like that where it's tough, and it's tough even when you're pre-trip planning, right? On a Friday, you might be, having the hall pass on Saturday, and you're going out, and I've looked at it too. I've looked on some online maps, and there's some areas where, you just can't see squat. You can see where docks are, and there might be an occasional oyster bar that was caught like on really low tide satellite image. What do you do in situations like that when it's just more murky? What are you looking for?
So a lot of times that's where you're going to hopefully look ahead at some of your maybe online maps. But if we're going to a new area, I try to have, 4 or 5 rods rigged just with different setups. I might have a paddle tail on one, a jerk bait on another, a spoon, or a spinner bait. And, you just kind of start pitching and see if you can elicit a bite. If hopefully you're hoping you don't have a bunch of wind, and if the wind is behaving, then you're certainly looking for pushes, boils in the water, maybe any indication that you might have a school of fish that are ahead. And then I'm going to choose a bait. If my water's, and we have a lot of chocolate milk water here, I usually like to go with kind of like the pearl white patterns or anything that's got some chartreuse in it. And those are usually my go-to colors if I know that water's going to be extra dirty. And then, we all know scent certainly can help in that situation. So using the scented Z-Man baits, even gulp. I'm not going to lie, gulp is always in the tackle bag, especially if there's a tournament, because sometimes it takes a stinky gulp shrimp to actually elicit a bite.
I'm with you on that.
So, and then I'm a big fan of Procure. I know there's folks that will say, it doesn't make a difference, but I've actually started putting that on my scented Z-Mans and my non-scented baits, and I do think it does make a difference here, just because we do have that darker water and dirtier water often. Our tides are very extreme here. We have our tide cycles every 6 hours, and we have I think next week I've got a -1 foot tide, and then we've got almost a 7 foot tide, a high tide, and so that makes it super hard. You got ripping current. And you got chocolate milk water. And so, you then got to find areas where those fish, are holding, and where that water's moving, but it's moving slow enough that you can still keep your bait, within a good presentation.
All right. So can you talk on that? And obviously not asking you to reveal your spots, but just the type of spots. Are you talking about going into creeks? Are you trying to find, some of these canals or areas with docks? What are you doing? Because that is, that's foreign to a lot of us down here in the Gulf, right? Like in Tampa area. That's unheard of. So how do you fish tides like that?
When there's flood tides like that, you've got to find areas. You're along your grass lines where those fish can kind of get up. In and around, certainly those feeder creek areas. You're looking for those bends where you maybe got a little slacker water. If you're fishing docks, you gotta hopefully pick the right side of where you can at least keep your bait into where your potholes are around that dock. But not getting pushed by too much by the current. So, I think that's key, like when you're using your trolling motor, and for folks who don't have that, that's definitely something I tell people to add onto their boat, because these features of having the spot lock and being able to anchor yourself allow you to kind of get in those trickier zones where those fish often are holding up tight, especially when we do have faster moving water. So
yeah, it was funny. I know someone in the insider community they had a new boat. And it was basically just kind of base model. And they're like, all right, I can only afford one. Should I get a trolling motor or a power pole? And everyone's like, trolling motor, go for the trolling motor. I think you're absolutely right. And and obviously with some of these newer trolling motors, like you mentioned, you almost have your own built-in anchor anyways. It's crazy what these trolling motors can do.
Oh, well, you can quieter and stealth when you're sneaking up on those fish, and I mean, I haven't thrown my anchor once since I upgraded to the nicer trolling motor, and just being able to get in, like if you're fishing docks, you can literally, squeeze yourself between two and get into a pocket to fish that you otherwise, you'd have to trespass and get on the person's dock in order to actually be able to pitch a bait back.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I want to pivot over to top mistakes. It's something I try to cover on every podcast interview. And that means mistakes either you made or that you see other people making that you bring out on your boat. Could be mistakes that you wish someone had told you, like, man, I wish I didn't have to figure this out the hard way. Anything's come to mind?
I think the big thing is you've got to be willing to, alternate your baits. If something's not, try something else. Oftentimes we go one day and we catch fish on bait A, and then we go out the very next day, same conditions, and bait A is not working anymore. Well, I need to pull out B, C, and D, and sometimes it's just a matter of changing up, color or size or pattern, and those fish all of a sudden wake up. So that was something, especially when I first started fishing artificial, I really didn't know a lot about it, and I didn't know what certain patterns did and why you would use one versus the other. And, so I think just, changing up, your lure selection, and then also the way you're fishing, your cadences and how you're retrieving. I think a lot of that, certainly will help, and just, practice. I think for a lot of people, if you can't, for me, before I was fishing, if I was lucky, maybe once a month, and that would be on a Saturday or a Sunday. Certainly had to pick a day. And, I hadn't practiced enough, so my casting wasn't great. And for a lot of, especially I think in Charleston, you're fishing docks or you're fishing, any of our flats, if you're not an accurate caster, it will make a huge difference. And I can see that on my boat right now. Not patting myself on the back, but I know that if I've got, I'll take people fishing all the time, and, I can outfish them 5-1 just because, my casting is such, I've got accuracy, but I've practiced a lot. And I think that makes a big difference. You're able to get it into, those areas where the fish are, and the saying is certainly, practice makes perfect. Far from perfect, but, I've definitely become a better angler just with a lot of practice.
Yeah, it's funny. I've had multiple people, including some legit pros who have their own TV shows, have said the same thing. Is they say, get good with artificial lures, because there are times of the year, and we're going to talk about that in a second, about fishing, cold fronts. There are times of the year when just bait's tough to come by, or, you just want to have more freedom, right? To be able to go out real quick for an hour and not have to worry about catching bait or buying bait. So it was, become proficient at using lures. And then 2 was casting, and especially on docks. I won't name the person's name because they might be listening. I'm pretty sure they are, but Luke and I took another insider member out not too long ago, and we were fishing some docks. Kind of a windy day. We went in this wind protected little area that had a few docks, and they're great fishermen, but not used to skipping underneath docks. And all the fish were holding literally underneath these docks. And Luke and I were both catching fish. This other person caught 0. Same lures, same boat. And it was all because we had practiced a lot, and we, grew up bass fishing, doing the little skip cast. And it literally separated us from catching fish. To your point, it could be 5-1 just from knowing how to do a skip cast under a dock. It is critical. And what's sad though, Tanya, is, and I don't know if you even know this, half our members probably don't even know, but we came up, we had these mastery courses, and one of them is casting mastery. And it's not just the obvious stuff about, here's how to skip cast. It's some of the methods and the mechanics of getting more out of your cast. I think we talked about it's guaranteed to get you at least 10 more feet every cast. And if you're fishing all day long, especially if you're tournament fishing and power fishing, how many casts you're doing in a given hour, and then you do that times 10. I mean, you're talking about football fields of extra casting distance you're getting, over the person next to you. And that's usually in the best feeding zone, right? I mean, if you can get an extra 10 feet away from your vessel, I mean, you're usually in a better casting area. And I say all that to tell you that was our worst performing product, like in terms of a course that we ever sold. Like no one, not to say no one, but like it might be like one or two people will buy it here and there. Whereas like people will buy our Redfish Mastery course every single day. There's people buying that thing, and we don't even really have to market it. And we try to market the casting thing so hard, and no one wanted to buy it. And I think it's because it's not sexy. It's not really exciting. And a lot of people probably think they're good at casting. In reality, that could be one thing that's holding them back. And I say that because I know there's someone listening that probably needs to hear it, is practice it. I mean, that one little thing can make a massive difference in how many fish you catch. And I think one thing that I really want to hammer, because you mentioned, I think people like yourself who have it just dialed in, you take for granted sometimes just that finding the fish. And it's just to make sure you're in a feeding zone, right? And my question is, how long do you stay in an area or a spot that you've picked out before you move on, where you're like, all right, this is just, there's no fish here, no matter what lure I'm tossing out?
If it's an area that I've fished before and I know there should be fish, then we'll probably give it, a half hour, maybe an hour. Okay. If I'm doing a newer area, I might prolong it a little bit. I mean, I do try to plan my trips where I like to fish around the lower tide. So I kind of like to fish in the last 2 hours of the outgoing, and then the first 2 to 3 of the incoming, if I can plan my day around that. And so that kind of dictates, where we're going to go. But I want probably a half hour to an hour is, and then it's going to depend on who's on the boat. You got somebody who's like, hey, we're not catching fish, we need to move. That will sometimes, change up what you're going to do. But I probably camp out a little longer than the average bear, just, because if I haven't fished that spot, doesn't mean the fish aren't there. It's just it might not be exactly the right time. And so I have found if I can maybe be a little more patient, you give it time, those fish will actually turn on, and you go, man, I'm really glad we actually waited, because they are here and now they're feeding.
Very cool. All right, let's pivot over to the cold months, because I've seen even as of last month, you're still making posts where I think a lot of people, especially the further north you go, into South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, it's almost that mindset of, hey, the fish have lockjaw, nothing's biting. How do you overcome that and catch fish in the wintertime?
Those are days where I do, we try to make sure on the boat that we've got maybe some mud minnows along with our artificial, and pick an area where we hope maybe the sun's been beaming down and that water's a little warmer. And just we start pitching out to kind of see what's going to bite. It's not uncommon for us to actually throw out a live mud minnow and just, kind of let Rodney, the rod holder, do the work just to see if there's something there, and then just kind of work the areas that we're around. And I think this time of year, we do tend to camp out in our spots a little longer. Just to give it time, because typically, I won't say we fish the same spots all the time, but we go in a lot of the same areas just because I know those fish are going to be holding there. And of course, we release all of our fish. And so, I can go, okay, I know that this spot, typically we're going to catch fish over here, the last hour of that outgoing tide. And again, it'll depend on how big of a tide we've had as to whether or not those fish are going to be there. But sometimes we'll go, and we had a tough day. I actually fished Monday, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I only got one redfish to the boat. And I was bound and determined I was not going back to the dock skunked, because it was going to be embarrassing. Because it just, it doesn't happen very often. And so, but it was a tough day, and we were in an area where we always catch a good amount of fish, but they were not feeding. And And I think a lot of it had to, we couldn't really find warm water. We had a pretty cold snap the week before, and it dropped our water, in the low 50s. I think 52 was the warmest I could find, and those fish just weren't eating. And when they would, when you get a bite, it was a very subtle bite.
Yeah.
A lot of that, I think this time of year is trying to find your warmer water, and just this time of year, it can be being patient. Our redfish bite here in Charleston is pretty much 12 months out of the year. So you can almost always find some redfish, and my other go-to this time of year is a sheepshead. I mean, we can almost guarantee if we're going to fish over some structure, we can certainly pull up some sheepshead. So.
And they're fun and they're great eating. We did that last week. Luke and I did, and I hadn't really gone out and targeted sheepshead in a long time. That was a blast.
Yeah, it's something that I tell people. You will probably say more bad words than you've ever said in your life when you fish for them. But they are very, very fun to catch, and absolutely agree. Very, very good table fare. If we catch some nice ones, those will often come home in the fish box. But it's a great way when you're limited on what's feeding. You can pretty much almost dangle a fiddler crab or something comparable and get a few of those in the boat.
Have you tried those fake crabs? Those little chase baits, the crusty crab, and there's another one similar to it.
We have not, but I tell you, we sell a ton of them in the tackle shop, and we've had some really really good feedback. So I know they work. I typically I'll keep my freezer is actually full of frozen fiddlers because anytime we have a trip and we have live ones, I always just save them. And of course, the guys are like, "You're not going to catch anything on this." I'm like, "I can tell you, they actually work just as good." So, but we've got some pretty cool. I haven't had a chance to use them yet, but iStrike has made it's called a jailbait, and it's a pretty cool little rig that they've come up with for the sheepshead, and a lot of the guys are using those at our nearshore reefs and out at our jetties for catching some really nice size sheepshead on.
Oh, is that the one that has like the big one eye? It looks like a big eye.
Yeah, it's got a big eye and it's got two hooks, and then you use a little rubber band so that the crab doesn't get penetrated with the hook at all, and so it keeps that crab stays alive the whole time, and it's pretty cool concept. So,
yeah, I saw that. What was the movie with was Wozniacki or whatever that has the big eye from one of those Pixar movies? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. And I can't remember the movie.
Mike Wozniacki or whatever. But yeah, it looked, and they had the iStrike one right next to him because he's just basically a green thing with a big eye, and it looked identical. It was hilarious. That's too funny. So I'm curious, because you've done some tournaments now. How do you think differently, and how, or do you, in terms of pre-trip planning and just your overall game plan? What are you doing differently on the tournament days where you have to catch fish?
Tournament days we are covering, pre-fishing, we're covering a ton of ground just to try to find multiple areas where, we hope on tournament day those fish are going to be holding. And it's just working banks, We'll put in the water super early and stay on the water till 5 or 6, till it basically gets dark, and it's just we're pitching baits, and it's like you said before with the casting. I mean, you're casting and casting and casting because most of the time when we're tournament fishing, it's not put the rod in the rod holder and just watch it. It's you're working your baits and working your booty off to elicit a bite, for these redfish. And it depends on the time of years. It's springtime. They're not as schooled up. The water's warming up, so it can be harder. You're not finding those 50 to 100 fish in schools. You may be finding 10 to 20 fish, and then you're hoping that you can get some of those fish to bite. And then you also need them to be the appropriate slot size. Here in South Carolina, our fish are 15 to 23 inches, and it is very, very hard to get an upper slot fish here, honestly. We have a lot of large fish and a lot of small fish, but those perfect 22 3/4 inch fish that are 5 pounds are few and far between. So it makes tournament day very tough. But we typically, will fish like 2 weekends before with the same tide, and then we'll fish several days before the actual tournament. And again, it's just you've got probably 4 or 5 areas in your mind that you're going to go try and hope that if you found fish those 2 days before, that those fish are going to be there. And if we do find fish, we leave them alone once we catch 1 or 2, and we know that they're feeding. We don't hit them hard. It's like those fish are there. Let's go find the next group and see if we can find a few that are are going to be hopefully in the slot and eaten on tournament day.
That's cool. And I want to talk about, you were honored in the was it Angler of the Month, Coastal Carolina Fisherman.com? Pretty awesome.
So
pretty awesome. I remember seeing that in the community.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure how all this has come about. I'm certainly very honored and humbled. I think a lot of it has to do with like I said, I've been working at at our tackle shop for the last year, and have really had the opportunity to meet a ton of people, and certainly go fishing with a lot of folks, and take people fishing, and certainly do a lot of posting with you guys, and I'm big on Facebook. My husband, it drives him crazy, but I do like to post pictures, and I like to see what everybody else is doing. And for whatever reason, I guess I got noticed. Actually, one of our local captains here, I think, tooted my horn to somebody, and that was kind of how that sort of started. And then I got asked to speak at the boat show and do a seminar, which was really cool. And I think as a lady angler, it's really nice to see that the fishing industry is looking more towards women who fish, who actually know how to fish. I know we're in a world where social media is huge, and unfortunately, I think sometimes women are we're portrayed in a negative way, and it's not all about bikinis and looking good. I mean, who doesn't want to look good? But I think for the industry, to me, the way it looks like they're directing themselves is, hey, let's do some things that are respectful for women and show off that these gals can compete and are comparable, and it's about them as an angler, and I think is a great thing to see that's happening in the industry.
Yeah. What is it, in your opinion, like, are you having a lot of your female friends that maybe haven't fished as much? Are they now more curious? And it looks like I've seen some reports of you taking out friends. Are you seeing it growing a lot for females and opportunities? I know we talked offline real quick about some opportunities with some lure companies, and what do you does it feel good? Like, oh man, we got some really awesome momentum.
I think it certainly is moving in the right direction. I mean, I don't know why women have sort of taken a back seat in fishing. I think there's a lot of anglers out there or women that would like to start doing it, and I think the more that they see that there are women already out there doing this, I think they'll move into being brave enough to get that boat in the water and start doing it. I think the statistic I was told before I did my seminar was that I think it's like 40 or 45% of boat owners are actually women, which I found that was a lot higher than what I expected. So with that being said, I don't know if it's are they just out there cruising around and maybe weren't interested in fishing, but certainly I think it's a great thing for anybody to get involved in, and I think it's the soul to get out there and do. I tell people, I mean, for me, getting out on the water every day, and if I can toss a line and catch a fish, it's a bonus. But man, it's just so therapeutic.
Yeah.
To get out there and do that, and so, but yeah, I do believe that we're seeing more women, enter it. certainly not all about girl power, but I support it. And I just think it's very cool that, we can be, role models for people out there. Our world's kind of in a messed up state, and, anything that we can see that's positive to draw people in and hopefully, get them just, thinking about, ways that we can make things better, I think is certainly always a good thing for all of us.
Absolutely. I love it and support it. And, and I love seeing all the pictures of you. And I've got, 2 young daughters, and I want them selfishly to be into fishing. So far, one of them really is. The other one is so. She likes to be out in the boat. She likes to catch a fish, but she doesn't want to touch the fish. But then again, she's only 5 years old. But I love it. I want them to be able to have tons of role models and other female anglers like you who are inspiring them and blazing trails and in many cases out fishing all the guys around them. So I love it. So you guys, gals, thank you so much for all the support. If you are an Insider member already, make sure to go to our community and follow Tanya. She's just super helpful too, which is another reason you're getting recognized. You do really, really good, very detailed fishing reports, and you can learn something from every one of them. And if you're not a member, come join us. You can go to saltstrong.com to learn more about the club. We have an unheard of 365-day, 100% money back guarantee. And our goal is really twofold. One is that you do catch more fish, obviously, and have more fun doing it. And the other piece of it, and also saving time and money ties in all that. The other piece of it is the network. And for me, and even these calls like this, I feel like I now have a new friend in you. And every week, I feel like there's someone else new I'm connecting with. There's some new member that we ended up taking a conversation offline. And of course, we've had some events. We're going to have many, many more. I love the fact it really has turned into a family and a community. And I'm sure, Ken, you can agree, just having that network, whether you're a tournament angler or not, is really powerful for those days that you are fishing. It's great to be able to see kind of what's working in your area and other areas, and it's a great way to get ideas. I mean, just yesterday, one of the guys, Dave Dowdy in Pensacola, was talking about how he goes from spot to spot, and he's in his kayak and he trolls. He just trolls a paddle tail on a jig head and catches a ton of fish. And so yesterday we found ourselves in a basically a really, really long idle zone area around the state park. And normally it would have been a time like we just kind of sit there and like check our phones, like, man, let's throw a couple paddle tails out and some heavy jig heads. And we tore it up. We caught the biggest trout of the day, just literally going through this little channel that was right next to a grass flat. And I think we caught 6 fish in that idle zone just trolling, and that was all from an idea that we heard from the network. So I encourage all of you guys to come join us. We're having a lot of fun over there. And Tanya, keep up the amazing work. I'm looking forward to meeting you face to face here. Hopefully this year. I know we're going to try to make a couple of trips up that way once it warms up a little bit more. A little bit too cold for me, but I'm dying to get up there and go fishing with you. And anything else? Any other final words for the audience?
No, I just say get out there and go fishing. It is absolutely worth it, and way better than sitting behind the desk if you don't have to, or sitting on the couch watching TV. Much better to be in the boat.
Amen. Turn the TV off, get out in the boat, find a friend that has a boat if you don't, or even get a kayak. I love the fact that this sport has really made it accessible to anyone. We've had Wader Dave on here before. Really, if you can afford a fishing rod and some wading boots, I mean, there are plenty of places to even catch nice trout, reds, flounder, all from shore. So, Tanya, thank you so much for all the support, all the love. And guys, gals, please do, if you haven't already, also subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a review. Let us know any other topics, special guests that you want us to have on. We would love to hear from you. You can find all of that at saltstrong.com/podcast. Until next episode, we are out. Peace.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. Find us on the water if there was. So